Hello, dear friends. Hello, dear friends, and welcome. Welcome to the morning plenary of day 3 of World Unity Week 2023. New Earth Rising. And we've heard some of the songs and some of the inspirations and some of the messages that are coming up this morning, which is just wonderful. We just showed an incredible conversation with Steve Farrell, the Executive Director of Humanities Team, and his brand new book, The New Universal Dream. And I couldn't be more excited to be welcoming this plenary today, convened by Humanities Team themselves. Now, if you're not aware, Humanities Team every year in October hold a very special event. Global Oneness Day has become the Global Oneness Summit. So this is perfect to be having our friends from Humanities Team here on this day of oneness, where we are celebrating the frequency of oneness. And so in the spirit of oneness, I'd like to bring up again our dear friend and brother, Steve Farrell, and I'll do a little introduction for you, Steve, as you come up here. But let's bring Steve Farrell forward here, and then we'll introduce the other panelists. So Steve co-founded the Humanities Team non-profit in 2003 with Neale Donald Walsch, who's with us back in World Unity Week as well, author of the Conversations with God series, of course. Steve is the executive director. He's a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle and contributed a chapter to their Nautilus award-winning book, Our Moment of Choice. He lives in Boulder, Colorado with his wife, Stephanie, their 2 young adults, and their dog, Sadie. So welcome, brother. Welcome back to World Unity Week. And while I've got you all here, let me complete the introductions. Neale, it's such an honor and a privilege to have you back with us. Thank you for being with us. Neale Donald Walsch is a modern-day spiritual messenger whose words continue to touch the world in profound ways. I can say that back in 2000 and 2001, when I first came across the Conversations with God books, they touched me in profound ways, as they did millions of people around the world. With an early interest in religion and a deeply felt connection to spirituality, Neale spent the majority of his life thriving professionally, yet searching for spiritual meaning before experiencing his now famous Conversation with God. The Conversations with God series of books that emerged from those encounters have been translated into 37 languages, touching millions and inspiring important changes in day-to-day lives around the world. Neale's written over 30 books on spirituality and its practical application in everyday life. And Neale is also a co-founder of Humanities Team. He lives in Southern Oregon, where he lives with his wife, the American poet M. Claire. They travel extensively throughout the world, speaking to audiences and sharing the message of the Conversations with God material. I actually saw you speaking, Neale, in Melbourne, probably more than 20 years ago here in Australia. Finally, Ross Hostetter, and I'll just do the introduction for Ross. Ross is a lifelong spiritual seeker, a path that was initiated by a near-death experience followed by a profound opening into the unitive field that occurred while on an extended solo canoe journey into the Canadian wilderness in his early 20s. This and other experiences were chronicled in Ross's award-winning work of fiction, Keepers of the Field, an invitation to the unitive life, published in 2014. Ross and his lifelong partner, Mary, have been involved in numerous spiritual undertakings, including co-founding an intentional community exploring Christian mystical experience, co-founding the Integral Center in Boulder, Colorado, creating court annex mediation in Texas as a path to peacemaking, and engaging with and leading a myriad of international practice communities and groups. Ross currently works for Humanities Team as strategic advisor. So, gentlemen, it is such a privilege and an honor to have you all with us, Steve and Ross and Neale, here in World Unity Week on this day devoted to oneness. And today's session, which is really all about changing humanity's future by living into our unity and oneness. Steve, over to you, brother. Welcome back. It's great to have you with us live in Room 1 for World Unity Week.
Well, Ben, thank you. Thank you very much for the generous introduction there for me and my partners here, Neale Donald Walsch, Ross Hostetter. Ken D. Foster is going to be with us here shortly as well, part of this panel. And today, of course, we're celebrating oneness. So this is the perfect day for us to be on, because oneness is when we talk about unity, we talk about oneness, right? And oneness is, my gosh, if now isn't the time where oneness becomes foundational in the way that we live our lives than what is. I just want to, I'll share something briefly here, and then I'm going to go over to Neale and Ross. Here in the United States today, it is Juneteenth. It's actually a federal holiday here in the United States. And Juneteenth celebrates the emancipation of slaves. We had a civil war, right, in the United States. It ended in the 1865-ish timeframe. This is when the emancipation of slaves was complete following the Civil War. And Juneteenth celebrates the emancipation of these people of color that were sold and made to work, right, as slaves. And that was only 150 years ago. So Juneteenth in its own right is just a huge deal. It's past time that we talk about to things like this, where, you know, horrible things that were part of our evolution here planet-wide, and certainly here in the United States, and now give these people of color their fair due and celebrate them with this incredible, their contribution and their diversity and their beauty and their blessing, and right, they're this huge part of oneness. Now, I also want to bring in that it's interesting that that's Juneteenth, because as you know, Humanity's team is about the civil rights movement for the soul, right? So we can likewise celebrate the emancipation of our souls, or of ourselves, as we talk here during this program. We are all one, right? Science increasingly is coming in, even the Nobel Prize for Physics, October last year, coming in and sharing entanglement is true. Two things with no physical connection in the universe are deeply affecting each other, right? One of the properties of oneness. So we increasingly can really understand through science, not just spirituality, that we are all one. Einstein and many other scientists before him, including Nobel Prize-winning scientists, physicists, have come in and shared their research. And now Nassim Harriman with the Resonance Science Foundation and many others sharing that, my God, you know, we are inseparable from the universe, and the universe is inseparable from us. We're actually sovereign to this one body. And the scientists now sound like a preacher, where they share, you know, we ought to be walking straight and tall and in good posture and empowered, because the universe can't be without us. So it's time, right? It's time. We're not just here with fluffy a talk here during this program about oneness. It's not fluffy at all. It's ultimate reality, and it's time that we live into it. Because in living into it, not only is this microcosm problem solved, which means that we become healthy and happy and we create well-being, but the macrocosm problem, right, with the extreme weather and global warming, and you could call it this fire that's burning on the planet because we don't know who we are, that we can put that fire out, that we can create a healthy planet, we can live in well-being, we can live in ultimate reality, where we emancipate ourselves, where we emancipate our souls, where we in a sense become the civil rights movement for the soul. Okay, and with that, we can just come back to gallery view. We'd love to, with Neale and Ross, and I'm not sure if Ken D. Foster is here, but Neale, and of course this story with the civil rights movement for the soul, the founding of Humanity's team, this is all in the Conversations with God books, Tomorrow's God. You know, what an unbelievable thing, where we're sitting there reading pages where you and God are talking about this moment where we have this whole new understanding of God, a civil rights movement for the soul. Can you come in, please, and just share?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Steve, very much. I want to begin by saying that I'm so sorry that Ross did not get the message, but we're all supposed to wear red and white checkered shirts today, and Ross, you know, obviously is out of uniform, so he will be chastised severely for this when the program is over. But let me explain. but let me explain about the civil rights movement for the soul. I had a dream many years ago now, rolling around, you know how we all do, rolling around in bed trying to understand everything. And in my dream, I was seeing a soccer field or a football field where all of humanity was on the field, and they all were wearing different uniforms. There were the red shirts, the blue shirts, the green shirts, the orange shirts, the yellow shirts, the white shirts. I saw all these different, uniforms, but because I saw that everybody was on a different, team, if you please, a different squad. And they represented, I could see, it was one of those dreams where you know that you're dreaming and you understand the dream. We've all had those kinds of dreams. They're called lucid dreams. I had this very lucid dream. And I saw all these different teams of people from different races, different colors, different religions, different political organizations, different political persuasions, different economic levels, different sexual orientations, even different genders and different age groups, everybody celebrating, if you will, the differences between us. And as I watched this scenario in front of me in this dream, I remember thinking, but who will be on humanity's team? Why isn't there just one team? Why don't we just have a humanities team? We're all wearing the same jerseys, where we all wear red and white checkered shirts. And we all hold the same point of view about life. Who will be on humanities team? And I woke up out of what I thought was a sound sleep, but I bolted upright in bed thinking, that's it. We need to create humanities team. And I invited some people that I knew to come to my home and to discuss it, because these are people who had discovered the Conversations with God books and made themselves known to me. And Steve Farrell was one of them. And so we gathered in my home for several days, for a long weekend, and talked about what we could do. And Steve actually took me up on it. There were others who were involved and excited about it, but Steve actually really understood the opportunity that was placed in front of all of us, I believe, by the highest power. And so Steve decided that he was going to do something about this and volunteered to become the worldwide executive director of Humanities Team, which was not a small decision for Steve, which is described, by the way, in his book, because he dropped everything else, including his entire business, his entire career. He was a very successful businessman. I don't want to say he was really successful, but he was really successful. And he had made like, two or three dollars. And he was, or actually he was rolling in dough. But he had more beautiful future to come. And he was, a leader in that whole Silicon Valley movement. And he dropped it all. He said, you know what? This is an important moment in human history, and I'm going to play a part in it. And he became the executive director of Humanities Team and gave it shape and form and substance and reliability and organization and the genius that he brought to it. And he and people like he and like Ross and others and began to pull together this and to make Humanities Team not just a vision, but a reality, creating teammates in countries around the world and extending an invitation to everyone else as well to join in the process of producing a civil rights movement for the soul. Now, let me just explain one thing about that, because that was a turn of phrase that I came up with when we were talking about Humanities Team. I said, you know what this really is? It's a civil rights movement for the soul, freeing humanity at last from the oppression of its beliefs in a violent, angry, and vindictive God. Now, I've got to explain just briefly why that's important. Why do we need to be freed from the idea of a violent, angry, and vindictive God? For a very good reason. Most of the world's religions, and by the way, there are 4,000 religions on the face of the earth right now. I didn't make that number up. That's an actual number. Google it. 4,223 religions on the face of the earth right now, not since history began, but being practiced on the earth today. And most of those religions teach of a God who is loving for sure, but who can become apparently vindictive and judgmental and become even a little bit angry if we don't obey God's laws, God's rules, God's decisions, God's choices, whatever you want to call it, the 10 Commandments or whatever the rules are in your particular religion, what you're supposed to eat, what you're supposed to drink, what you're supposed to say, what you're not supposed to say, what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to wear, what you're not supposed to wear. And by the way, I'm not kidding about that. There are religions who actually teach you that you must wear certain clothing. And there's one religion that says if you're a female, you must cover your entire body from head to toe. And all you can allow is a little slit for your eyes so that you can see out, so at least you can see where you're walking. And that's it. But while you're walking, by the way, don't dare leave the house without being in the company of a male relative. And, all these rules that there are, rules said to have been given to us by God. Now, here's why this is important. Not that I want to, pick a fight with religions, because I don't. Religions have given us great, great wisdom as well, wonderful insights given to us by all the world's religions. But here's the problem. If we think that God is violent, angry, vindictive, judgmental, and punishing, and will send us to the everlasting fires of damnation, we will do the same thing with each other. Because what's good enough for God is good enough for us. So if it's okay for God to behave that way, why shouldn't we behave that way? So we decide, in fact, that it's okay for us to be judgmental, condemning, and punishing. And we've been doing that for thousands of years. We're doing it even today. And what underscores that whole idea that it's okay to be judgmental, condemning, and punishing is the idea that we're separate from each other. See, because I'm never judgmental with myself, at least not to the point where I'm going to send myself to hell. I got another joke behind that, but I'm not going to tell that joke right now. My usual one-liner is I've had several marriages like that, but that's another joke. But what I really want you to know is that I'm willing to accept myself and to forgive myself. We all make mistakes. We all make wrong turns in the road, but we don't send ourselves to everlasting damnation. Only God does that. Except if we're human beings who believe in that God and who think this is the way things should be, then we do it as well. We're doing it right now in Ukraine. We're doing it right now elsewhere in the world. We've had armed conflict on this planet for all but 5% of the world's history. On this day of our lives, 653 children are going to die of starvation. Not on this one day, every hour. You heard me correctly. I said every hour we're going to lose 653 children to starvation because we can't solve the problem, or because we haven't determined to solve the problem, to make it a better world, to create heaven on earth by deciding that we are all one. That what I do for you, I do for me, and what I fail to do for you, I fail to do for me, because we are one humanity. We are not separate from each other, and nor are we separate from the God of my understanding. That we're talking about a higher power that is an aspect of every single one of us. And once we decide that we are really all one, that what I do for you, I do for me, and what I fail to do for you, I fail to do for me, the world would change virtually overnight. That's the mission of humanity's team, for us to finally accept and embrace and practice the notion, the awareness, the truth that we are all one, to launch truly, at last and finally, a civil rights movement for the soul, freeing humanity at last. That's what I would offer. I'm sorry I don't have anything important to say on this topic, but that's what I would offer.
Thank you, Neale. We love it. We love it. We love that civil rights movement for the soul. I'm just going to pop in here and introduce Ken. D. Foster, who is with us. Thank you again, Neale Donald Walsch, for those beautiful, beautiful opening reflections. Let me just say a few words about Ken, because Ken is actually facilitating today's discussion. Ken D. Foster is a transformational leader, master business and life coach, best-selling author, and human potential expert. He is the executive producer and host of the Voices of Courage show, syndicated on TV, podcast, radio, and broadcast in 185 countries. He's a change maker who helps people take the path of courage to realize their essence, maximizing their highest potential, and see the unseeable, know the unknowable, and do the impossible. Perfect. Thank you so much, Ken, for being with us. World Unity Week, New Earth Rising today. It's all about oneness. And thank you for being with us to facilitate this conversation, changing humanity's future by living into our unity and oneness. Welcome, Ken. Oh, do we?
We don't hear you, Ken. We don't hear you, Ken. Your microphone is not on. In the lower left-hand corner.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Ben. I really appreciate it. And it's good to be here with all of you today. And I'm wondering, Ben, did we have a formal introduction for Neale Donald Walsch or Steve Farrell or Ross today?
Yeah, we did, Ken. All those formalities are out of the way, so we can get into the juicy stuff. And that has all happened. Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's get into the juicy stuff. So why don't we go over to Steve for a minute? And Steve, I'd like to ask you a question today. Neale just identified the challenge, at least from a religious point of view. I want to ask you from a human identity point of view, how do people identify themselves today versus how people might want to identify themselves in the future? A lot of times people identify themselves as their accomplishments, but I think we have an identity crisis. Can you address that a little bit, Steve?
I can, yeah. So this is oneness, where, and I'll share of my own experience and kind of how it happened. We all find our own way into it, but so for me, and conversations with God was the awakening device for me. So there in the middle 1990s, 1995 is when book one came out, and of course, Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer and A Course in Miracles, and there's many. They're actually back to 450 BCE, right, when Plato and then Hippocrates, within 30 years of each other, shared that there's no plural consciousness. There is only a singular consciousness, which is to say that we're all 8 billion faces, right, of the one, and then we add in the planet and animal life and plant life, the universe. We're all a part of this one energy, this one presence that we call the divine and humanities team, but our friends that are scientists like to call it cosmos or universe or life, and that works fine. In our understanding, the one that we call the divine doesn't care what word we use. But it is important that this is really our moment. This is why we're here, our moment to understand, to really study that science, to study these teachings, and to realize that we really are all one with all of what is here on the earth, the universe, and the cosmos, because it is foundational. And it's the thing that not only brings unbelievable joy and health and well-being, I'll call it even the deliciousness of life, to our own life and our families and our homes, but it's the thing, again, that the microcosm, macrocosm, right? We heal ourselves, we heal the world. We heal the world, we heal ourselves. As we come into this Malcolm Gladwell tipping point, we get to that 4 to 8% that know ourselves as a part of the one, and start living that way. Then macrocosm all of a sudden starts melting into this whole planet that we've envisioned, this dream that we've had, that our kids, that future generations are going to enjoy a beautiful planet, much like what many of us grew up with. So that's why this is our moment, and this shift has already begun, this great shift of the ages. And it's there's nothing more important than this pivot, this shift that's going on. Now, for me, what happened is I just sat with these two truths here that were in front of me. This was in the mid 1990s, and one truth is that I principally was the son of Linda and Joe, my parents. The other truth is that I principally was the offspring of the one, the divine. And yes, of course, my parents were, if we're going to use airport language, were the terminal that delivered me here to the earth. But I was principally one or the other. In the first case, it was just the incomplete science of I'm in this body called Steve Farrell, and at the end of my life, I'll go to bones and dust, and they'll put me 6 feet under. In that second scenario, yes, the physical body will fall away. The end of my life, I'll go to bones and dust, and whatever happens to me. But I have everlasting life. I have unlimited potential. I have the Rumi quote, right? I'm not just a drop in the ocean. I have the whole ocean in a drop. So this is the contrast. Which one am I principally? And of course, I decided that principally, I'm that second one. This is the oneness. This is where what Neale was bringing in, that what I do for you, I do for me. This whole term of you and me is almost jargon, because there actually is, in truth, in science now, which is affirming this. In truth, we are part of one presence. But by the way, not to get off on tangents here, but we did a program with Wayne Dyer's kids, you may know, called Life After Death. Sage Dyer's, Serena Dyer's 2 youngest daughters, where he's quite active in the afterlife. If you followed our humanities team programs, he wrote a book through Karen Noe. And one of the things he shared as he's present now in today's world is he says, I did have one thing wrong, that I was focusing all the time on I am, not we are. I could, humanities team is a 501c3 nonprofit where there are so many programs. We have free programs. We're doing one now with Dr. Evan Alexander, who had this incredible near-death experience. He wrote a New York Times bestselling book called Proof of Heaven, where he takes people through his NDE. So we have many programs, science-based, mediumship, NDEs, that are taking people into what science is affirming. Again, the second decision that I made, that I'm a part of the one. That's what I'm principally. Yes, my parents played a role and do play a role, but principally, I'm offspring of the divine. And once we make that decision, and once we make that decision collectively, then it's foundational, right? And if you've read the Conversations with God books, this is what it talks about, is that in the universe, this is what highly evolved beings have done. They've made this decision. It's foundational, that everything is relating back to our oneness. And so they live completely different lives. And these lives that they live create unbelievable health and well-being and deliciousness in life for us individually. And the whole planet prospers. We come into true prosperity, what abundance really means, what joy and laughter and health and well-being really mean. So it's why we're so, why we get up in the morning, why we're so excited, why we do all the things that we do in humanities team. And I don't mean to just be sitting here talking about humanities team this World Unity Week. It's what we're all doing. It's why you're here. You're conscious. You're on the same journey. When we talk about diversity and unity, we're absolutely talking about the same thing. So we're certainly here to celebrate with you. You will notice we're bringing in something in addition to just celebration. We're bringing in an importance. We're bringing in an urgency, that there is urgency now. A lot of people aren't necessarily connecting the dots and saying, oh, the extreme weather maybe is relating to global warming, which maybe is relating to us not being conscious where we see our oneness. But we're very clear in humanities team, these things are all connected. And the sooner that we start really being aware of who we are and then living into it, embodying and expressing that, the sooner we're going to get to this deliciousness in life, which is what we all want individually. And the sooner we're going to end this extreme weather thing and things like the war in Ukraine, which is Neale mentioned, we can't start wars like that when we're conscious. And I'll go back to you, Ken, here with that.
Right. Thanks, Steve. Well, let me switch over to Ross for a minute. I have a thought I think will just plus what you're saying here, Steve. And the current research, of course, supports the new worldview. It supports the new paradigm, and it supports what the ancients and mystics have been sharing with us for eons, right? And, that, of course, everything is one. So, Ross, here's the question for you. With this new paradigm shift, with what we're going through now, how do we redefine how do we define success or redefine success?
Oh, it's a great question. Thank you for that. Just as a little ramp up into that question to follow on what Neale and Steve have been talking about, we do live inside of what might be called a domination system. And there are all kinds of social structures that are built up to affirm that structure. Some of those are theological, like Neale was talking about, and many of them are structural. You see it in the pyramid of the 1%. You see it in the wars that we have. So what we're seeking here is the first domino. What would change that system? A Galileo moment where we realize that we have the ladder up the wrong wall. We are not seeing the world as it could be or actually is. And the first domino of the solution is not to see ourselves as separate. And so what we're doing here in terms of this call, the World Unity Week, I think is exceptionally important. So I just wanted to start with that. With the question about success, obviously that's a few dominoes down the stack. But how we define that is really important, because if we define it as winning the domination game, which is the current default definition, winning the capitalist game, winning the war game, being better than the neighbors, we're going to be playing into the domination system every day of our lives. So one, easy anecdote to that, we could imagine greatness as something to be admired, but goodness is something to be transmitted. Okay, that's something that we all can do. Okay, we don't necessarily have to get on top of the domination stack in order to be good. And so we can begin to define our success in terms of the quantum of goodness that we put out into the world. Goodness itself is one of the big three. Goodness, truth, and beauty are the proper directions of the evolution that we're all about to undertake together and are undertaking together. And not only are they directions of evolution, but they are portals for involution as well. So I think all of us on the call here have something to do with that. Goodness is one of the great vectors to walk our talk, to be, to transmit goodness to people, and we know it when we see it, and we feel it. And this movement is going to be judged by the quantum of goodness that it puts out in the world. It's also going to be judged by its beauty, the beauty that it produces, and the truth that we're able to bring to the world. So I guess that would be how I would define success. To be a vector, a portal, a unit, of consciousness that produces goodness, truth, and beauty.
That's great. Neale, let me switch over to you for a moment.
Yeah, let me interrupt before you even ask me your question, because I want to add on to what Ross just said.
Please.
We can't achieve success in what we're doing until we understand what we're trying to do. Here's the challenge. My experience has been, and by the way, including my own experience, until I was 53 years old, I had no idea what I was trying to do. I mean, I thought what I was trying to do was what Ross was talking about. Get to the top, be the best, be successful, get the girl, get the guy, get the car, get the house, get the better car, get the better job, get the better house, blah, blah, blah. Get the building with my name on the side of the wall, blah, blah, blah. The domination system that Ross so beautifully described. And that's what I thought I was trying to do. So the challenge I want to put before the audience here today is this really what we're here to do? Is this really what we're trying to do? We can't be successful until we know what we're trying to do. And the largest number of the people on the world are not really clear about my observation. I wasn't until I was 55 years old. And what am I trying to do? And here's what I've discovered that I'm trying to do. And I didn't even discover this. This is what I was told, the information I was given in my conversations with God. Neale, what you're trying to do is realize and express and experience who you really are. You are here on earth in what's called the physical realm, so that you might express and experience through the demonstration of it, your true identity. That's what we're trying to do. We are trying, in fact, to know who we really are through the experience of it, and who we really are, as Ross and Steve were saying, are truth and beauty and goodness. That's who you are. Or to put it, I'll put it in one word, God. We are individuations of divinity. Dare we believe that? Dare we accept it as a truth, that we are each individuations of divinity, waves on the ocean of God, if you please. The wave is not separate from the ocean. It's not something other than the ocean. It's not different from the ocean. It's simply an individualized expression of the ocean, beautiful and powerful and dynamic in its expression. And when the expression is complete, the wave recedes back into the ocean, whence it came, to arise again on another day. That's what we're doing here on this planet. That's what we're doing here in the realm of the physical. We've come to the realm of the physical so that we might know experientially who we really are. Now, when I get what I'm really doing here, can I just give you a real brief example of how that looks in real life?
I think that would be appropriate, Neale, because I think there's a lot of people out there that says you got to find out who you are, and they start asking that question, and they don't get it. They don't get that they are ever conscious, ever existing, ever new bliss, that they're connected to the infinite, that there's spark of the divine. They don't get that. So how do we shift that so people actually get that?
That's exactly the question that I asked myself, years ago, and I discovered the answer at the grocery store. This is kind of a strange story, but this is an example of what I'm talking about, how to make that real and functional in our life. I went to the grocery store one day many years ago. My wife said, "Hey, we need some staples. Could you run over to the store and get some bread, butter, eggs, and milk? Some of the ordinary list of staples." I said, "Sure." So I got to the store. I went to the local grocery store, and I'm thinking as I walked in, as I walked in the store, I'm thinking, what am I doing here? Oh, I came here to get bread, butter, eggs, and milk. Yeah, right. I got to get a bunch of groceries. I knew where everything was. But as I came around the corner in the vegetable department, in the produce area, I saw a lady with a little child in the cart, in her shopping cart. The child could have been 3, maybe 4 years old at the oldest. And the child was reaching over and grabbing grapes from the fruit, where the fruit was, and eating the grapes. And the mother said, "Oh, sweetheart, no, don't touch the grapes." And the little girl kept on doing it. So finally the mother, gave her little daughter a little tap on the hand. You didn't hit her hard, just because, "No, honey, no, don't touch the grapes." And the little girl started to cry. Wah! Now I'm watching all this. Now, I'm telling this story for a reason. I thought I went to the store to get bread, butter, eggs, and milk. No such thing. I went to the store to be who I really am. And so I walked up to this lady and I said, "Ma'am, I know it's none of my business. Please excuse me, but I just want to share with you, it's not necessary, to tap your daughter on the hand and give her a little bit of a You don't have to do that in order to get her to do or not do what you want. She laid right into me, rightly so. She said, "Who do you think you are? You have no idea what's going on in my life. Leave me alone." And I said, "You're right. You're totally right. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I just wanted to tell you that there's another way. There's another way that you could do it." And so she said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled at you." She said, "But I just don't. If you only knew what was going on in my life." And I said to her, "What is going on in your life? Tell me. Share with me." We talked for 20 minutes in the store, in the produce department. We're talking about, and she was explaining that her husband just lost his job. Her father passed away 2 weeks earlier. This was happening, that was happening. It was one of those periods of life, where things occur that we wish were not occurring. And she was really at the end of her rope. And so and I said, "Oh, sweetheart," so we talked more about what could be done in moments like that. And if we were really working together and we were really all one, and how we could experience and express, our oneness with each other at times like that. And finally, she began to calm down. She felt really very good about certain things. I shared certain ideas that I had from conversations with God. I didn't tell her that I wrote the book. I just was sharing with her from my heart. Two people talking heart to heart in the produce department at the grocery store. All the while, by the way, the mother was taking grapes. The mother was grabbing a grape and giving it to her daughter. And now, but here's the end of the story. She looked at me and she said, "What are you, some kind of a minister?" I said, "No, well, no, I'm really, well, actually, you know what? That is what I am. Some kind of minister. We are all some kind of minister." And when I went out to go home, I got to my car and I realized I was in seventh heaven. I was in a different place. I got to my car and I started to drive away and I thought, I don't have any groceries. I left the store without getting anything. I'm going to go home. My wife's going to say, "Well, where's the bread, butter, eggs, and milk?" I said, "Oh, that's why I went to the store. That was what I was doing, but it's not what I was being." So you know what, my friends? This is how it becomes practical. When you just ask yourself this question, here's the life's magic question. As you encounter life, whatever you're doing, grocery shopping, or whatever you're up to in your life, whatever the moment brings up for you, just ask yourself life's magic question. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? What does this have to do, what's going on right now, with the agenda of my soul? This little, minuscule quarrel that I'm having with my wife, this moment of disagreement that I'm having with this political leader around the world, this idea that I'm experiencing right now with the lady in the supermarket. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And when you ask yourself that question, it recontextualizes the moment and you become instantly who you really are. Watch out. It'll change your life. But more importantly, it'll change the lives of everyone whose life you touch.
I love that. Thank you for the beautiful story, Neale. Steve, I'm going to redirect to you a little bit. And what I want to share that from I'm listening to Neale, I'm putting myself in that place of there's something going on around me that looks a little out of harmony. And now I have to tune in to courage. It took courage. There's a part of courage that came out for Neale to ask that question or to be able to confront that lady in a very loving and gentle way. I think courage is a big portion of this new paradigm shift because it takes courage to live in oneness in a world that believes in separation. Steve, how do we shift into that courageous part, just like you did, leaving corporate America to go on a courageous venture that you're still on? How do we tap into that, Steve?
Earlier, Ross brought in this term Galileo moment. This is a Galileo moment. So Galileo, as you probably know, was born in the late 1500s. In the early 1600s, he had grown into a pretty esteemed person in the world. Really the father of physics, the father of astronomy. At the time, and this was just, this was again late 1500s, early 1600s. What was operative was called the geocentric method of astronomy. So, and in the geocentric philosophy of astronomy, the sun was revolving around the earth, right? We were the middle of the universe. And this was a big deal. The church was the primary influence or institution of power in that day, much the same way business is the primary institution of power today. In the early 1600s, it was the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church had a real problem with this all of this research that Galileo was bringing in, where he was saying this, a Dutch person invented the telescope, and he created then his own telescope, and he was doing observations of the universe and things. And he said, oh my gosh, the sun does not revolve around the earth revolves around the sun. And there were many other observations he made as well, which is why he's called the father of physics and astronomy. So what then entered in was what was then called the heliocentric philosophy or astronomy, which is that the earth is revolving around the sun. Now, this was a great problem for the Catholic Church, and there was incredible heat put on him. At that time, you may know, people were beheaded and would lose their life when you would go up against the church. And this kind of pressure was put on him that he was very close to losing his life. And he was put under house arrest for the latter years of his life. And the only reason that he wasn't killed or transitioned is because they made him say that his research wasn't true. He denounced his heliocentric model and said, no, the geocentric model was in fact our reality. But of course, it didn't take many years with telescopes and things for us to realize that, ultimate reality doesn't work that way, that we revolve around the sun, etc. So your question to me, Ken, was, so what kind of courage?
We're talking about, you just talked about it, because Galileo took courage to courage and wisdom, right?
I just want to say one thing relating to it is we know that we're one. We do know that. And I'm going to say something as well, that we're actually, almost all of it, us, everybody watching, that we're awake, that we're all awake. We're already awake. Some of us don't know that we're awake. And we need to just start. Neale brought in a story from a grocery store. We need to just start really living into our awakeness, because people that are here have gone through the classes, they've been through the seminars, they've read the books. This moment, this shift, this whole pivot to this whole new way of living on the earth, where we're living consciously in diversity and unity and oneness, it requires that we now really live into it, that we know we're awake. So now it's time for us to take the steps. The example of what Neale shared in a grocery store. And there are many other examples we could share where we live into our oneness. That's the important thing now. We already have the awareness. Now we're at this stage where, yes, have the courage to really live into it and live into it fully, and keep stretching into it and stretching into it and inviting others to stretch into it, and to speak honestly about our journey, our conscious journey, where we share of the things that we're doing that are really working quite well, and sharing of our challenges as well, because most of us have challenges.
I really like what you said, Steve, that we are awake, and some of us don't realize the awakeness that we are. Ross, I want to redirect that to you. You've been through tremendous changes in your life, and there were pivotal moments during those changes that shifted everything for you. I'd like us to bring those pieces into this conversation, and how to maybe practically recognize when you were awake, and those shifts that needed to take place in you so that you could see the unseeable and do things differently.
Well, thanks, Ken, for that question. One way to frame it is to realize that we're not only just waking up, but we're growing up at the same time. Okay. And it may look like two opposites, but it's a polarity. It's two parts of one thing. So in terms of the big moments, I would say that the big moments come into those two different categories, and they all then work towards a third thing, which is a more mature human being. So I have had major waking up experiences. I had a big experience of oneness enlightenment out of the blue, without any practice or anything, on a wilderness canoe trip when I was in my early 20s. There's been, many of those experiences, since then. But a lot of what I would say has been important has been the growing up experiences, becoming a father, being in a marriage now 37 years, changing my worldview from being a litigator in Dallas, Texas, to becoming a peacemaker and a mediator, and using those skills to make peace and be a witness to suffering. So I would say that the really challenging moments have been in both of those categories. And what tends to both wake you up and grow you up, it has less to do with success than you might imagine. The failures in your life oftentimes wake you up and grow you up and need to be embraced as evolution. So, trying things, failing in things, the soul wants to guide. Oftentimes the soul will give you things that are above your pay grade to actually bring into the world, and you'll give them a go and they won't make it all the way. And so all of us are listening to both an interior call of what we might become, and then are also aware of all of the exterior problems, all the exoteric challenges that we can make a contribution to and solve. So I think that in this new world to come, we will be looking at both. We will be both doing and being at the same time, and finding a way to help and be useful in the world as it is right now, and also waking up to a new world to come.
Thanks, Ross. Neale, let me switch back to you. Hey, wonderful question, thought that Ross just spurned for us. Are we becoming?
How do you follow that?
I know. Well, let me ask you here. Are we becoming something, or are we just uncovering the realization of what we already are? And if so, how do we tune into that wisdom to maybe evolve that process?
Well, I think it's clearly the second. Ross explained it, I think, perfectly. He himself is in the process of writing a book. And I mean, if he isn't, he should be, because I'm going to demand it. I want a book from him in the next year, because he has the articulation skills to put very complex concepts before us clearly. My answer to your question is yes, it is the second. And our opportunity is to place that before humanity through the living of our lives in a moment-to-moment way. I'm not sure if I can explain it any better than Ross and Steve are doing. These are two very articulate human beings, and I tend to stumble around for words and not really know what it is I want to say next. But I would say this: look at each moment of your life and watch what the moment is bringing up for you at a subconscious level, because we already know, just as you said, my friend, we already know who we really are. See, nobody has to tell you. You understand when you've done something you really shouldn't have done. If you want to live up to your own standards, when you said something that gosh, I wish I hadn't said that. Why did I say that? Or when we miss an opportunity to offer something that would have been extraordinarily helpful, but we let the opportunity pass us by. We all know when those moments have occurred in our lives. Nobody has to slap us across the cheek and tell us, hey, wake up. We are already awake. We already know that. The question is there a way to know that ahead of time rather than after the fact? rather than after we miss the moment or misplay who we really are in that moment? Is there a way to know that ahead of time? And that way, in my opinion, my friend, is to just use life in the way it was intended to be used. That is to see your life, every moment of your life, including, yes, the trip to the grocery store or whatever else might be going on. Reaching into the refrigerator to see what you're going to serve your family, for dinner tonight, or turning on the TV to see what do I want to watch, to decide every moment of your life to let yourself know, wait a minute, there's a way for me to demonstrate who I really am here. That's what I came here for. Now, it doesn't have to be a big, heavy trip. It doesn't have to be, oh my God, all of a sudden life has gotten to be like this huge ordeal. No, it can be a joyful, wonderful experience. As you walk down the street of your life, looking left and right, you will find opportunities to demonstrate who you really are and to speak into what you already know, just as you pointed out, and to then step into the knowing of it and the being of it, and as Ross said, and the doing of it. I'm going to give you one tiny example. A couple of years ago, a policeman was putting a parking ticket on my car. And I was coming out of a coffee shop, and I had overstayed my, and the parking meter ran out. So he's putting a little $24, whatever it is, parking ticket on my car. I said, sir, officer, could I talk to you? And I know he thought I was going to give him a ration. He said, yeah, what is it? And I said, I just want to share something with you. I'm aware of the fact that every morning of your life, when you put that little piece of silver metal on your chest and you pin it to your uniform, you're making a silent promise. A quiet promise to yourself that if anything comes between me and harm, if I'm ever stepping into harm's way from any source whatsoever, you will step in between that and me and protect me. You've made that decision, and I want you to know how much that means to me. Thank you for choosing that way of life. This guy walked up to me. He said, you know what? I've been on this force for 27 years. Nobody has ever said anything like that to me. You've just made my whole career. He turned around and he walked away with a tiny little drop of water coming down the side of his cheek. I didn't say that to brag on you. I'm not trying to tell you what a wonderful person I am. I'm just giving you an opportunity to notice that every single moment of your life, you have an opportunity to be who you really are by noticing who everyone else is. Give people back to themselves. Listen to all the words that have come from Steve Farrell today. Listen to all the wisdom that's come from Ross today. Listen to what these two gentlemen are telling you. It's about giving people back to themselves and giving you back to yourself. I promise you, do this for one day and you'll never stop again. It'll change your whole life.
Wow. Well, it's a great challenge, Neale, and I'm hoping our audience really heard that. Today's the day, one day, to really look outside of yourself a little bit, and maybe even inside yourself to acknowledge what's right there. Steve, I want to shift over to you, and I want to ask you, I think we're just going to plus this because this is what we're talking about. But let's talk about creating the conscious culture. And what does that look like for you? And how could we define our own lives by creating a conscious culture in our homes, in our communities, in our nation, and in our world?
So let me share. Some scientists have devoted just a lot of their lives to this whole subconscious, conscious, superconscious, supraconscious. So let me talk a little bit about this. Bruce Lipton shares that the first 6 years of our life, we are magnetized to what our parents do and how the house operates and so on. This becomes our subconscious. And then without even knowing it, it's what we just do on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. As we educate ourselves and become more and more conscious, which is what Humanities Team as a 501c3 nonprofit is about. We created this conscious streaming platform called Humanities Stream Plus, and we're a nonprofit. So we're just getting that price down, even the monthly price down, give it away for free. a one-for-one program. So a paid subscription, we give away a free subscription. And the reason we're so excited about this platform is Neale Donald Walsch's masterclasses, Michael Bernard Beckwith's masterclasses, Greg Braden's masterclasses, Nassim Harriman's masterclasses, Bruce Lipton's, on and on. All of their masterclasses, hundreds of these masterclasses are on this, these video trainings are on the platform. And then as well, it's a community where we do watch parties and all kinds of things, mentoring, live mentoring sessions, to deepen our own conscious journey, to deepen our own awareness as to what and who we really are, and the invitation in life and all of these things. Now, we don't have to take many of these video trainings or participate in this community so long before, you know, again, we really get it. We really get what life is and how it works, that we are all one. And as we move on this evolutionary curve from subconscious to conscious to superconscious to supraconscious, in supraconsciousness, and if the Conversations with God books have beautiful definitions of what supraconsciousness is, it's where we, of course, we're on the conscious journey, we're intentional, right? That we get up every day and we're very intentional about what we're going to do this day. Not only that, but part of this whole conscious journey is we become metaphysical. We spend that quality time where we're really peering into the future, where we're actually creating the future. That's what metaphysics is, right? A lot of people like Joe Dispenza now, because he talks about creating in the quantum field. That's metaphysics, okay? It's what actually, this goes back a couple thousand years. Remember, it's done unto you as you believe, right? 2,000 years ago. So this is metaphysics. So we're in metaphysics, part of our meditation time is we're peering into the future, and we're seeing healing in our homes and in our communities. We're seeing out in the world. We're seeing wars ending. We're seeing the climate crisis being healed. We're seeing all of these kinds of things. So in supraconsciousness, we're leaning all the way in, and we're embodying and expressing what this oneness is. It's becoming who we are. It's why we're here. I perceive that in this whole great shift of the ages and this pivot that's going on right now, this is exactly what is happening to so many people. And I'm guessing as I'm talking that many of you are saying, that's me. That's what I'm doing. I'm getting up. I'm intentional. I'm metaphysical. I'm actually embodying it. I'm expressing it. I am that. This is a conscious culture in all of its, when we talk about beauty and truth and goodness, this is where it's on display. And it's a simple process, really. And I think even just as I step through this from subconscious to conscious to superconscious to supraconscious, and I'm kind of speeding through that, not getting to the ones in the middle, but on this end, I think people can relate. I can see in the chat a lot of people relating. So supraconscious, endeavor to really embody it and express it, live into it fully. And metaphysically, you know, again, one of the things it says in Conversations with God, metaphysics is the linchpin of the universe, the linchpin, right? So we're, instead of rear view mirror, as so many of us, you know, today of, oh, I did this in the past, this is going to happen in my future. We're living very powerful, as powerful creators right now. It's done unto us as we believe, where we are visioning into this beautiful future that we're creating as supraconscious individuals.
Well, you know, I thank you for that, Steve, first. That was really amazing. That was powerful. And, you know, for years, I've been helping people to see the unseeable, know the unknowable, and do the impossible. Ross, this is directed to you. It all starts, though, with basics, with the ABCs. And a lot of the ABCs are our daily routines. So I'd like to get personal with you, Ross. And maybe you could share a little bit about your daily routines that take you into the conscious, superconscious realizations in your own life.
Well, thank you, Ken, for that question. It's really an important question. It really is a question about practices. I will start with the observation that there are intentional spiritual practices. And I do some of those. I have a daily meditation practice, which is basically an awareness practice that I do every single morning. I use the RPM system, rise, P, meditate, and spend about 40 minutes in kind of a pure awareness state that is very helpful in reframing all the thoughts in my mind and getting me ready for the things that I do during a day. Oftentimes the things that I do involve dealing with a lot of conflict and disorder. And so that's really helpful. You know, I have a robust yoga practice, take care of myself physically, eat well, exercise, all of those basic sorts of things. But I would say that the main practice is to realize that every moment, just as Neale is talking about, every single moment is the practice. Okay. And this is going to work out and be known. We've known this for a long time, that you know this by its fruits, right? The involution of the spirit and everything that we're talking about here, it has fruits. It has fruits of calmness, of order, of kindness, all of those virtues. And so every moment is practice. How we do our work is practice. How we do the gardening is practice, relate to our children is practice, especially in our intimate relationships with our family is practice. And so there is no unimportant moment. I'll just say that.
Oh, wow.
Not a single unimportant moment.
That's the title of your book. That's the title of your book. There's no unimportant moment.
Very good. You're going to be my book coach, Neale. There is no unimportant moment. And so I'll just say that, and also to formal practices are helpful. I think they're helpful more or less to get us out of our domination, get us out of our separate sense and everything like that. But the real practice is every single moment.
Every moment. Neale, I would like to switch over to you for a moment on that. Every moment is important. And you know, sometimes on this path, people push our buttons. People, there's things inside of us that upset us, they anger us, they flare us up. On a practical level, with this conversation we're having about awakening and bringing more consciousness to everything that we do, everything is important. Any tips on that from you?
Well, at the risk of being repetitious, Ken, I ask myself the magic question. When I feel my buttons being pressed, and like you said, it happens to all of us, you know, when I have that experience, I simply go immediately to the question that God invited me to ask. Wait a minute. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? My wife and I, you know, we love each other dearly, you know, but, you know, we live together 24/7 for years and years and years. You're going to have a moment or two once in a while. Things are not going as smoothly as you would like. You look across the room and maybe your sweetheart says something that isn't landing the way you wish it would land. In the old days, I'd be defensive and I'd be right. I want to show that I am right, which is a given, by the way. It's a given. I'm right at all times about every single thing. So I would go ahead and want to explain to her why I was right and why she was wrong about that. Until I asked myself the magic question, wait a minute, what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? I'm at the post office about 3 or 4 months ago, and I've been standing in line forever. It seems like forever. And I really felt like I was being ignored because he kept on going. The clerk behind the clerk at the desk kept on calling on another person, sir, ma'am. And I thought, you know, finally I wanted to say, wait a minute, I've been standing here for like 25 minutes, you know, and then I realized, wait a minute, what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? So my friend Ken, the secret that I have found is what I call life's magic question. When my buttons are being pressed, I simply recontextualize the moment by asking myself that question. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And when I understand that the agenda of my soul is for me to announce and declare, express and fulfill experience and demonstrate who I really am and who you really are. Then I used that moment to give people back to themselves. I got to that counter at the post office and I said to the clerk, you know, I see how incredibly busy you've been just while I've been standing here. You're busier in these last 25 minutes than I've been for a week. I don't know how you deal with that kind of pressure. Thank you for dealing with that kind of pressure and still staying in a fairly good mood and being of such service to all of us. You know, this person looked at me like I was from Mars. Guys, say things to other people that nobody else says. Do things for other people that nobody else does. Be like Ross, be like Steve, be like Ken, be like who you really are. Do it for a day. It'll change your whole life.
Well, here's another one of those challenges from Neale, and I just love it. So I'll put it in my words today, maybe even for the next 7 days. Try to do something you've never done before. Never done before. Think about it. All right, Steve, I got to circle back to you with this question on creating in the quantum field. We've got a few more minutes, and I think you touched on that a little bit about creating in the quantum field and manifesting our energy and generating success and love and joy in that field. Can you touch base a little bit more what that means to us and how we can apply that practically?
And before Steve does, let me be terribly inappropriate, but I do have to leave. My time is extremely limited today. I'm glad I was able to be here for this period of time. I thought we'd be done around 1/4 past the hour, so I have to say goodbye to all of you, but thank you very much. Thank you so much for hosting this program and for making it happen. Ken, thank you for your work. And with your forgiveness, I'm going to have to make my departure now.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Neale. Thank you for being with us.
All right. And we are going to wrap up here in just a few minutes. So, but stay tuned. We've got some more wisdom coming your way. Steve, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So, if you go on TikTok, you'll see which a lot of the younger demographic is there, right? And you'll see Joe Dispenza with a lot of this whole creating in the quantum field, he calls it, which this is metaphysics, which, as I mentioned, has been around forever. This is acknowledging that we are energetic beings, right? And which shouldn't be something new. Einstein, everybody in science class was taught E = mc², right? Means you can't get rid of energy. Energy lives forever. We're energetic beings. And we're just now learning, how do we, as energetic beings, as powerful creators, how do we harness that? So what this involves, metaphysics, is it's saying, and again, there's so many that have excellent teachings. We have master classes on this topic, is focusing on that which we are creating, what we really want, what we deeply desire, tasting it and touching it. Focusing on that. So during your day, where you just creating 5 minutes or 10 minutes, where you stop out on your porch or in your favorite chair or somewhere where you can really give yourself your full attention to this future that we're creating in your home, in the community, in the world. So humanities team, changing humanity's future by 2040, making conscious living pervasive worldwide by 2040. Manifesting the new spirituality during this generation, awakening oneness during this generation. So for me, what that looks like is for the collective, I'm really feeling into what that feels like, where I'll even put political leaders that are authoritarian, that are creating challenging circumstances. I'll see us sitting together where they're just smiling, where they're in health and well-being, where they're in joy and laughter, and where a world is really taking care of the 8 billion people here and the planet itself. We're stewarding the planet, where I'm seeing that and feeling that and tasting that and touching it, not as a recording, but as a reality. So that's what metaphysics is, where it's something we deeply desire. We can feel it in our heart. I do this also for myself personally. I have many people know, one of my son has something called pyroluria, so which creates for him anxiety and separation anxiety. And I see him just happy and fist bumping me and moving into his own apartment and just full of joy and laughter and becoming a face of hope and possibility and destiny for others who have this pyroluria thing, which is quite pervasive, where we've got vitamin and mineral deficiencies in our bodies. So creating that time during the day, because what we are taught here as these energetic beings, powerful creators, is our creation goes toward that which we pay attention to. Our attention is our intention. So we really need to create that quality time where we're feeling deeply into that which we are creating, and not, I'll call that the front windshield of what is the future that we're creating, and train ourselves to let go of this whole past thing of this happened in the past and thinking about it, or thinking about the future, which doesn't really concern us now. Being right here, right now, and really feeling this beautiful future that we're creating is metaphysics. Metaphysics that's working for us.
All right, Ross, I've got one final question for you, then I'm going to come back to Steve and ask a very similar question. That, conscious creation, the expansion of the consciousness on the planet, shifting into the new paradigm is happening. We're all talking about it. It is here. There are a lot of leaders in the world that have not got the message yet. So, Ross, I'd like you to share the last few minutes here your message to the leaders of the world. What would you like to share with them? And of course, the leaders here right now, here and now, all of you are leaders. If you're in this space, you're all leaders. So we're so happy you're here. Ross, go ahead.
Oh, Ken, that's a great question. It's hard to do that in the abstract. I will say one of the things that Neale has, I know he's jumped off the call, but what he's demonstrated is a practice. So I want to do that first, and then we might get to the message. So what Neale just talked about with the policeman is a practice which might be called breaking the plane. Okay, that's a theater term, where there's a plane between the audience and the theater that creates the illusion of the theater. So there's a plane between Neale and a policeman, and a policeman has a role. They have deadly force on their body. They have a license to take you down, handcuff you, even shoot you. We've given them that power. And so they're a very isolated individual. I did a psychological study in college on police work. All they do all day long is hear all of the trauma of the community. That's all they hear all day long. They're in a vehicle that has electromagnetic radiation all around it, with all the buzzing lights and the radios and everything. And it's got deadly force in it and everything like that. And they are exceptionally isolated. Exceptionally isolated. So one thing I think to begin when you're speaking to a leader is to know that in many cases, they're an exceptionally isolated individual. Steve will, he's been out in Silicon Valley. He sees what business leaders are actually do. You go to the Yellowstone Club and these huge houses and these gates and gated communities and everything like that. A lot of what we call success is profoundly isolating. So the context is to realize that we are talking to someone who is kind of in a silo of their own making. They're in a trap. They're in a prison of their own making. So, and even Putin, somebody like that, Trump, whoever we want to talk to. This is, you look at it and it's really kind of like life in hell when you look at it. It's a prison of their own making. So the first thing is to see that, and then to see with eyes of compassion. And then let the Spirit speak through you to that individual, just what they need to know. You don't have to have a predetermined script, about what you would necessarily say to a leader, but all of the effective communication starts with seeing and being seen. So if you can see them, that's love. That's the lover's engine, seeing and being seen. So see them first. And then I think let the Spirit move through you into what you would say to them in that particular moment. And just as Neale said, that moment can change your life. So sorry, I'm not quite going to answer you with a canned script.
No, I love that.
Because you gotta be there.
Yeah, that was powerful. There's a friend of mine. She's her name is Elise Bridges. She's been out in the world hitting these little blue ribbons on people that say who I am makes a difference, and acknowledging people like that, Neale did with the policeman and the lady in the store, and just looking for opportunities to bring in love and compassion. Steve, final question. You've been in Silicon Valley. I love what Ross is saying here. You've seen the isolation, the separation. You've seen the illusions of wealth. You've also seen the side of wealth, which is how much good it can do in this world. Steve, what is your message to the leaders of the world at this point in time?
So let me first start by just bringing this in, which actually gets to that question too. It's that what I'm understanding on this conscious journey that we're on is that the term, we all hear the term transactional and relational, right? And on this conscious journey, as we keep journeying into this future, and even now, and this is part of the invitation right now, is there's no transactional. There actually is no such thing as transactional. That word will go away, because as in the chat, many people are talking about loving presence. Ross is bringing that in. Neale has talked about it. This is the conscious journey. This is when we talk about diversity and unity and oneness. It's love. It's loving presence. It's being a loving presence. And what I would invite, for myself, for all of us, is really throughout our day, in every moment, are we being a loving presence? Are we being a loving presence? If we're being a loving presence, there is no transactional. Transactional means I need you to do this now, and it's like that. There's not any connection in this. It's not transformational. It's not relational in a good way. So with leaders of the world, I use this term supra-conscious, but it's really maybe to make it easier, just being a loving presence. It's real where and there are ways we can do that, right? With gratitude or many tools that we can use throughout our day to keep us in this very high vibration state. And healers and alchemists, as we know, operate at a very high vibration state where they're then act as mediums and as healers, as healers with people, John of God and others. What I would suggest in our homes and with leaders and with everybody, it's just maintaining that very, very high vibration state where we are a loving presence and there is no transactional. And because it is not going to be by our vocal cords with people of influence, leaders out in the world, or anybody, that we create meaningful and long duration change. That change will only come through our beingness, through our embodiment and expression of what we're calling here conscious living, or this is the World Unity Week, through living in unity.
Thank you so much, Steve and Ross, and of course, Neale. And final thought from me is that, first of all, I want to acknowledge all the folks that put messages in the chat. There's a lot of powerful messages in that chat. I hope, I don't know if we can download the chat or if they'll be able to download it there during the World Unity Week. But if you can, hope you can go back and read those chats. And this has been a very awakening conversation. And I think that we've given people some very practical ways today to be able to apply this in their lives, along with the mindsets to rechange the thinking, and maybe dive deeper in meditation, dive deeper into consciousness and mindfulness so that we can start to bring in our own wisdom, our own intuitive thoughts to be able to show up in the world in a little different way. I just thank all of you for being here today. It's been my pleasure to host this, Ken D. Foster. And of course, you can check me out at kendfoster.com. I'm going to turn it back over to Ben. And Ben, thank you so much for the beginning of the show and hosting this. We really appreciate it. Back to you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Ken. And thank you to our amazing speakers. What an awesome quality panel. Steve, thank you. And Ross, great to get to meet you and get to know you a little bit. And Ken, thank you for your expert job. And Neale's just so wonderful, you know, the messages and the real life stories and applications of how in everyday encounters we can bring and be that change we want to see in the world. This has been a really beautiful panel. We're holding the space through World Unity Week and the 99 days with this idea, a theme of a new earth rising. And this is something that we are putting out there to connect back to, you know, both the spiritual consciousness communities and also people of faith. That is a terminology that goes all the way back to the prophet Isaiah. It's been used by many. And it's something that feels as alive today as ever. And I felt the presence and the spirit of New Earth Rising throughout this panel, carrying us forward and getting our day really begun in a beautiful way. This day 3 of World Unity Week, dedicated and devoted to oneness. So deep bows to you, gentlemen. Thank you, Steve, for putting such a fine, high quality panel together. We really deeply appreciate and acknowledge you. And Humanity's team is awesome. And go and look up Humanity's stream, where you can get incredible content like this on tap. It's just, it's so amazing, the resources that are available to people through Humanity's stream. And of course, Steve's brand new book, where he lays out his journey from Silicon Valley to a life in service to humanity in a new universal dream. We are richly, richly blessed. So we give thanks, and this moment of being here together, it's a privilege. It's a privilege. No unimportant moments. I love that. I love that, Ross. Even though it's a double negative, I think it works really, really well. Want to thank you both for being with us. Thanks to everyone in the audience. I know we could have kept talking for another hours to come, but you've inspired us, and we go forward from here in a good way. So thank you, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Steve, for inviting me on the call.
Thank you, Ross and Ken and Neale. Yeah, thank you. And viewers, thanks for being with us. Wow, it was a pleasure.
Okay.
A privilege and a pleasure. Yeah, Godspeed to everybody. World Unity